right. So, who loves their job? Yeah, I got a few out there. That's good. Who loves the fact that they're retired? Anyone? Yeah, a few of you out there. All right. I shouldn't be raising my hand. I know, I only work on Sundays, but that's not really retired, okay? How many of you love school? Well, you're in school and you love it. A few of you, a couple, not so many. Yeah, all right, good. How many of you hate your jobs or school or yeah, okay. No, we shouldn't ask that question? No, okay. Jobs are a funny thing, right? I mean, we spend so much time at our jobs. We spend so much time in this daily routine, right? This daily schedule that we have, whether it be school or whether it be a work or whether it be just wake up in the morning and kind of make a decision of what I'm going to do that day, right? Because I don't have anything on the schedule because I'm retired or whatever. That we have all of these hours that are spent out, doing these things. And depending on how those things go, we find sometimes, we come home, we're excited, right? It was a great day, we're feeling good, and kids come home, oh, kids, I love you, you're so wonderful, right? And then other days we come home and it's been a rough day, and we see the kids running out to us, Daddy, we're like, oh, stay away from me, kid, I need some time, It's, what we experience throughout the day in our jobs or in school or whatever it may be, our daily service, it impacts our emotions and our feelings, and we can be kind of bipolar. How many feel that way sometimes? You just kind of feel like, today was great, and then the next day it's kind of down in the dumps, right? And it's so much of our mood can sometimes be impacted by these jobs. And it makes sense, right? We spend so much time doing that, so many hours. Also, some of us find, and then maybe this is why we have the ups and downs and why it impacts our emotions so much, but we can get our identity out of these jobs that we have or as a student, right? And we can kind of allow that to impact how we see ourselves. If we had a bad day, it's, I've been unsuccessful and I'm not a successful person. If I've had a good day, well, then I'm successful and things are great. In the What's Brewing this week, I wrote a little excerpt in there about this identity piece and how we tend to get our identity from what we do and how we interact in this world. And that's a dangerous place for us to find our identity because it can go up and down. And, if we're really talented, then maybe we'll have a really strong identity, and feel like, oh, yeah, I'm really good. But if we begin to lose that ability, or if we just don't have those abilities, then our self-image starts to kind of get crashed, right? And we start to lose sight of who we are and why are we even here kind of thing, and those kind of questions. And so anyway, so we have these jobs that we spend all this time at, and they have a huge impact on us. And if we love our jobs, then great. If we hate our jobs, then, it's really a rough life. And I think Peter here this is where Peter wants to launch into today. In this passage in chapter 2, he wants to deal with the workplace, right? He set this up just going back a couple of weeks ago. We saw how he wanted to make sure we knew what our identity was, right? And so he spent this passage talking about this idea that we are the priesthood of all believers, right? That we are priests. And that we had a commissioning service, the idea that all of us have a ministry to do and a place to minister, right? And so, but he couched all of that in this identity. He wanted to make sure that we understood that we are God's. And the reason he wanted to do that is because he knew where he was going next. And where he was going next, he says, okay, now I want you to function in that identity in the world. I want you to be firm and understand who you are first so that when you go out into the world won't impact how you view yourself. The world won't impact what your real identity is. That you would find your identity in me so that then you can go out and evangelize well. That you would be able to share the love of Christ. That you'd be able to declare the praises of God. And so last week we saw the first area where Peter calls us to declare the praises of God is in the area of politics. That we would engage in the government, right, that's around us. That we would engage in the culture in that way. But we would do it with the purpose of evangelism. That's why we engage in politics. We don't engage in politics because we think that this country is going to save us. We don't engage politics because we think this is the road to heaven, is through having a great and Christian nation. We engage in politics because it's an opportunity for us to develop relationships and share the love of Christ. Next, he goes into the workplace. Now he's going to talk about our day-to-day journey. And he's going to say, hey, look, there's an opportunity here as well. Again, the context is evangelism. As we are engaging in the world, in our workplace, or in our schools, in our jobs, in our families, in just the day-to-day grind that we have, there is an opportunity for evangelism. There's an opportunity to share the love of God. There's an opportunity to declare his praises. And so how can we do that and do that well? So let's read the passage that's before us today. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 18 to 25. Slaves. What a great word to start with, huh? Let me be clear. We can look at this passage and say, oh, well, Peter's talking about slaves. He's talking about something that we are not. And so this passage has nothing for us. And if that's your perspective, you're missing it, okay? Jesus has something for us in here. And even though we are not a slave society, we all seem to work for somebody, right? And so this is speaking to all of us as we engage in this world on a day-to-day basis. Slaves, in reverent fear of God, and then the bad word we saw last week, submit. Slaves, in reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. For it is commendable if someone bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because they are conscious of God. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the cross so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed, for you were like sheep going astray, but now you have returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls. So I think the two key verses in this passage is verse 18 and verse 21, where he starts out with slaves in reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to your masters. And then if we jump down and skip the next couple of verses, we will see the importance of verse 18, verse 21, to this you were called. And then if you continue in that verse, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example. Slaves, submit to your masters. To this you were called, because Christ suffered and left you an example of how to share the love of Christ with the world. That's where we're headed. We see that Peter connects this, that we as Christians have a connection to Jesus. That he is our example. That we are like him. Jesus came to the world to love the world. He came to the world to save the world. And we as Christians are doing the same thing. We are called to the same thing. We see that Jesus' mission is our mission. And we see that Jesus' strategy to accomplish that mission should be our strategy. And then we see that Jesus' glory is also our glory. So let's start with mission. What was Jesus' mission? I already kind of said it, right? It's to save the world. That's why Jesus came. He came to save the world. John 3:17, for God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him, right? Jesus didn't come down to condemn. He didn't come down to destroy. He came down to save, right? we as Christians have that same mission. We are here to save the world. We cannot push this off on missionaries. We cannot push this off on pastors. And we cannot push it off on Jesus. It's Jesus' job to save the world. Jesus is the conduit of how the world is saved, but he does that through us, by us going and sharing the love of Christ. 2 Corinthians 5:20, we are therefore Christ's ambassadors. As though God were making his appeal through us, we implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. This is a couple weeks ago I went over this, right? And I talked about how this is for all of us. If we have been created new, if we are a Christian, then this is our mission. We have the same mission of Jesus had, which is to reconcile the lost to their Creator. Now, Jesus' job was to die, right, and to open up the door. But now that the door is open, our job is to help people to find the door. So here's the reality when it comes to our workplace. We must come to appreciation and an understanding that we are sent by God to our workplace. It is not just something that we do in order to make money. It is not just something that, we kind of fell into because maybe we were really, purposeful in our younger years and made sure we got the right education and maybe, we were really assertive and so we kind of went up the chain so that we could get the job that we want. Or maybe on the other side, we just kind of fell into it because, we weren't very assertive and we kind of just went with the flow and this is where we ended up and so this is the job we have. If that's the perspective of your job, then you need to change it. Because Peter is telling us here, and Jesus is telling us here, and the Bible is telling us that you have been called to where you are. God has called you to that place. That is the people group that God has called you to. We all are priests, but we're all missionaries. We all have the love of Jesus, and our job is to take it to the world. We must elevate our perspective of our daily routine. We must elevate the jobs that we do each week. All of those hours that we put in are not just to make you happy. They're not just to give you a paycheck. They're not just to make you feel fulfilled. They're not just to keep you from being bored. All of those hours that we spend are the mission. God has called you to that mission field, that people group, in order to share his love with them. We must elevate our perspective of our work. Just a word about this new generation coming up. There's a tendency to discount labor. There's a tendency among them to discount work and that it's not as important or it's not very, it's kind of, you just work to live or live to work, right? And they're work to live types, they're just going to do the very minimum. And that's okay. I'm not trying to insult them or in any way, younger generation. But what I'm saying is that because of that, there's a tendency to discount the value of the workday. That it's not important. That I have to do that because I have to make money so that I can survive. Right? That's the perspective. But I want to turn that around and say, no, you don't just have to do that. You're called to that. God has given you this opportunity to share the love of Christ with those people that you work with. As a student, when I was in college, I went to Bible college a little bit later in life. I was in my mid to late 20s when I started Bible college. And I remember I was commuting to school, so I didn't live on campus. I didn't even live in the town that I was going to school in. And my whole purpose for that education, for the school, was education. I didn't want to have any friends. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to go in, do the work, get the grade, and be gone. And so really for the first 2 years, went for 4 years, the first 2 years, I literally made no friends. I would drive in, I'd sit in class, I wouldn't talk to anybody. I mean, I have little short conversations, a little thing, but that's about it. And then when I was done with class, pack my bag, I'm out, and I'm heading home. Now, I had reasons for that. I had family, right, all kinds of other things. But I did not see it as a mission field. And I missed out on opportunities because I didn't see it as a mission field. I thought the only reason I'm here is to get this darn degree so that then I can be, justified and be able to go out and look for an actual job as a pastor. And I missed the opportunity for the mission field that God had sent me to. Now, thank God the last couple of years I was able to make some friends And I feel like there was some impact that happened, but not near what it could have been. If I would have just simply seen it as a place, as a mission field that God had sent me to share the love of Christ with these people. And I know that they're probably all Christians, but that's okay, right? That doesn't mean that we don't continue to share the love of Christ. So we need to change our perspective of work. If it's the sense that, I just do it in order to make a living, that please change. This is not what God's purpose is for work. This is an opportunity to share his love. Because of this perspective, sometimes we, again, this identity piece. We get beaten up at work. We have a bad day at work, and we come home, and we're like, what do I do with that, right? And we get frustrated, and we're depressed. We don't feel good. And the reason is because, again, we're getting our identity from our work. But we need to understand that we are sent to our workplaces by God. In other words, this is not our home. Your workplace is not where you should find your identity. You find your identity in the presence of God. And he has sent us into this world. We are aliens in this world. We are different than this world. And the reason that he sent us to this world is for a purpose. And that's to share the love of Christ. There's a bunch of TV shows out throughout the years that talk about aliens coming to Earth and how they're kind of, you can't tell that they're aliens, right? Because, it's usually these, sitcom type shows, right? And I'm thinking of Doctor Who, right? I mean, he looks like a human being, but he's actually an alien. Or Mork, from Ork. Yeah, he was one of my favorites. And Third Rock from the Sun. The idea that these are aliens that are here living among humans, but they're different, right? They're aliens in human bodies, but they're here for a purpose, right? They're here in order to learn and to study and to figure out who these people are, who the human race is, right? And Mork and Mindy. How many remember Mork and Mindy? How many watched it? Huh? It was so good. If you haven't seen him, you gotta look at it. You gotta look it up. Google it. Mork and Mindy. It's great. It's fun. Anyway, so I got a little clip from Mork and Mindy because Robin Williams here, unfortunately, passed away a couple of years ago now. But I think he's a comedic genius. He's just so amazing. I've always loved his movies, especially when he gets on his comedy routines. And this is one of them. So this is the famous egg scene from Mork and Mindy.
Hello? Hello? Anybody in there? Little hatchling brothers, you must revolt against your oppressors. You have nothing to lose but your shells. As much as I like Mindy, it's against intergalactic law to eat fellow space travelers. Fly, be free! Well, I guess we'll have to have a quick burial at sea, then. I'll notify your next of kin. Your brother...
So good. Anyway, so may we kind of see ourselves as aliens. That we would see that when we go out during the week, God is sending us to a different world. Our identity is who we are. We know who we are. We are a child of God. And God is now sending us out into this alien race in order to share his love with them. And in order to do that, we need to understand who they are. We need to have those conversations at work, that we would get to know the people. I mean, how are we ever going to share the love of Christ if we don't even know the people we work with? How are we going to share the love of Christ if we don't know the other classmates in our class? Or the teacher who is teaching us, the professor who is teaching us, or our bosses, right? How do we share the love of Christ without doing it in relationship? So may we see our workplace as this alien world that we're going into, but the purpose is not to find our identity, but for us to be able to get to know these people so that we can find a way to share the love of Christ with them. That's the vision that we have to have of our workplace. It's the mission that makes the job worthwhile. Next, we see that, again, connecting with Christ, Jesus has a mission. That is the same mission as us. Well, Jesus also has a strategy to save the world. And what was that strategy? Jesus came as a servant. Mark 10:45. For even the Son of Man For even the Son of Man, okay, this is God, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. The Pharisees did not like that Jesus, the Messiah, in their minds, had come to serve. They wanted Jesus to be a king. They wanted Jesus to be Lord of Lords and to come in and to bring his kingdom, and then that they would be able to sit next to Jesus and they'd be a part of it. Have authority and have power. That's what they were looking for. And Jesus came as a servant. We as Christians actually don't like sometimes this truth about Jesus either, because we don't want to serve. We want Jesus to be Lord too. We want to be triumphant, right? We want to have all the power. We want to have all the good stuff, right? We want to have all this amazing energy from God and the Spirit to indwell us and to give us the ability to do all these amazing and awesome things. That's what we want. But Jesus was a servant. And the same strategy that Jesus used is for us to use as well. Romans 12:1. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices. Jesus came as a servant, and he submitted himself even to death on the cross. We have the same strategy, to come as a servant. And if it means to give our life, we will. For the love of Christ. You see, God calls us to submit in the workplace. He tells us that we have to serve those who we work for and those who we work with. That's the strategy. The strategy is not to come in and be a part of a strike, right? The strategy is not to come in and say, oh, you guys are treating me bad, and so we're going to have this strike, and we're going to have this walkout, and we're going to create this chaos in order to get you to change because you're not acting like Jesus, or you're not treating us well. Did we ever see Jesus lead a revolt? Never. Were there plenty of things for him to revolt against? Yes. The same strategy that Jesus had is the same strategy we have. It's to submit to our bosses, to our coworkers, to serve them, to love them. Again, opening up doors for the conversation. Is your boss going to listen to you if you're the one who's leading the pack against him? Is there going to be an opportunity for you to share the love of Christ with him? What is the message he's going to hear? Right? Think about that. If you have a professor that's really tough on you and is giving you a hard time all the time, if you continue to fight against him, do you think he's going to listen to you when you come and share the love of Christ with him? No. We have to humble ourselves and understand that God has sent us to them to love them. And the way we're to love them is by serving them. That's the way that God shows his love, is through service, through caring for us, through loving us even when we're not lovable. Even when we are harsh and mean, he still loves us. How can we do that? We have to learn to develop a love for those. And again, this goes back to the idea that we're aliens. If we don't expect our bosses to treat us well, then we won't be surprised if they don't. If we go in with the sense that, you know what, I am here for a mission, and the mission is to share the love of Christ, then when they treat us harshly, we're not going to respond to it in anger. We're going to go, okay, how do I share the love of Christ with them right now? How can I serve them? How can I open up the door for a conversation? It's a whole different perspective, but we need to come with that perspective. We need to learn how to love them even when they're harsh to us. Moses was a pretty cool guy. I like Moses. But when he was up on the mountain, getting the 10 Commandments, all that kind of stuff, Aaron was down at the bottom with all the people. And what did Aaron do, right? He's doing this magic golden calf thing, right? That's pretty cool. I just threw the gold in and I'll pop this golden calf. It's amazing. And so God's up there with Moses. Moses doesn't know what's going on. And God's having this great conversation with Moses. And then all of a sudden, God steps aside and he says, wait a second. Moses, come back here. I can't do this anymore. The people down there, they're evil and they're horrible. And I just had enough of them. I'm going to wipe them all out and I'll start over with you. And what does Moses say? Oh, amen. I've been waiting for you to say that, God. These people have been, pain in my back all day long, and they just keep on criticizing me. I mean, every time it's like, why are you doing this to us, Moses? Why? And it's like, oh, please strike them dead. Is that what Moses said? No. He had already developed a love for these people. And it was actually God testing Moses. He said, where's your heart, Moses? Do you see that I've sent you to these people? Do you see that this is a mission that I've sent you on? Moses didn't even go into the promised land. He got nothing out of this. He wasn't doing it for the paycheck. He got treated horribly by these people for 40 plus years. Yet he loved them. He defended them. Because he was humble and he realized that this is the mission, that God loved him, that God wanted to save him. We need to come to that point in the places that we work and the places where we go to school, that we would understand and really love these people as God loves them. Finally, we get to blessings like Jesus gets. If we're on the same mission as Jesus, if we use the same strategy as Jesus, then we get the same glory as Jesus. One of the most beautiful things in all of the world is to be part of bringing someone to Christ. Luke 15:7, Jesus says, I tell you the truth, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. There is a party going on in heaven, and we get to be a part of that party when we get to be a part of that process. Right? I mean, if you've led someone to Christ, you know the joy that it brings. It's just so exciting to have that feeling and to know you were a part of this, that God allowed you to be a part of it. That all of that time and effort that you've put in to love that person, to care for that person, even when they were maybe even evil to you or mean to you in some way, whatever it was, right? That you had an opportunity to be a part of that. We get to celebrate with Jesus. We get to be a part of saving the world. That is an amazing privilege, an amazing blessing. We also, when we are on mission like Jesus is on, when we use his strategy, then we also find that the work that we do is commendable. Matthew 3:17. This is Jesus. He's at his baptism. And a voice from heaven said, this is my son whom I love. With him I am well pleased. This is what we all desire. For God to look at us and say the same thing to us. That he would see us as his son or his daughter, and that he would be well pleased with us. When we are on mission with God, with Jesus, when we are willing to sacrifice like Jesus sacrificed in order to accomplish the mission, then we also get to hear the amazing words of God, which says to us, job well done, good and faithful servant. Matthew 25:23. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. We get the glory. We get to be a part of that glorious experience in eternity. That we get to enter into the rest of the Father. That we get to be in his happiness. That we get to be with him. That we get to celebrate with him. It's a beautiful thing. And of course, the eternal glory we get as well. Romans 8:17. Now, if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ. If indeed we share in his sufferings, Jesus' sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. We get to sit next to Jesus and to receive the glory that Jesus receives. this is what makes it worth it. This is what we're living for. This is what we're striving for. This is the goal of life. This is the mission that we're on. And this is what we're called to. All right. May we check the perspective we have of our weekly work, whether it be in school or whether it be a job or whether it be just dictated by the schedule that we determine. And may we ask ourselves a couple of questions. First, are we actually serving the people we're with? Do we serve people? And I'm not just talking about serving to do the job, but serving the people that we're working with. Are you sacrificing for them? Are you willing to allow your schedule to get a little bit more chaotic in order to help somebody, to care for somebody that you're working with? You're willing to sacrifice. Do you really love them? You know, if God were to come and say, okay, I'm going to wipe out this person, what would you say? Would your response be, yes, finally? Or would it be, wait, God, no. I think I can break through. I think we're getting close. Let me keep working with them. Let me keep trying. Let me keep showing them your love. That's what Peter's calling us to. That we would not see our work as just a job. We wouldn't see it just as a way to make a living. That we wouldn't find our identity there. But that we'd see it as a mission. It's the people group that God has called us to, called you to. And all of us have a different people group we're going to. That's the amazing thing. And so, how are you sharing the love of Christ with your people group?